to hand over then, and who's kindly going to start the recording now. And if we can, Bishop Mary, is that all right to hand over to you?
About dying well from my perspective as a Christian person. If you haven't met me before, I've been Bishop of Reading for just 9 months, but prior to that have been 20 years. Throughout that time, I've had the huge privilege of accompanying people in their dying and supporting those who have been bereaved. And these experiences mean I've thought a lot about what it might be to die well. I know, of course, that this is a really sensitive area for all of us on the call. We'll be thinking about the deaths of those we've loved, some good deaths, I trust, but maybe some more difficult deaths. And this topic also might speak into things that we feel anxious about ourselves. So you probably don't need my encouragement to say be gentle with yourselves as you listen and take a break as you need to. You might be familiar with this picture that I've chosen for this first slide. It's by a 14th century artist called Giotto, and it's called The Lamentation of Christ. And it's the moments after Jesus has been taken down from the cross. And I chose it as my sort of starting image because it expresses something that's really important for me when we think about dying well. And that is that we pay attention to someone's soul, to the bit of them that reaches out to a being beyond them, to their emotions as well as to their body. And in this picture, at the bottom of the picture, you can see Jesus surrounded by his family and friends. But in the sky above, you can see the angels in heaven joining in with this moment of lamentation. So it pictures for me about holding the idea of dying well within the frame of body, mind and spirit, that we need to engage with the person's spirit as well as their body. If I could have the next slide, please. I don't know how many of you will have read this book. I really commend it to you if you haven't. Sarah Perry is an author, and this book tells the story of her father-in-law's death. He was an elderly man diagnosed with cancer, died very quickly following his diagnosis. He died at home, cared for by Sarah and by her husband, Robert. And they cared for him in the home with the help of the GP and the district nurses, the local palliative care team. But David is a Christian man, and so his pastor, called Luther, also cares for David's spiritual needs. And there's a really beautiful scene. I'm going to read a really short excerpt of when Luther, the pastor, is invited to David's bedside for what turns out to be a final act of worship for him. And at this point, David is drifting in and out of consciousness. He's not conversing much at all with his family. But then as this little service takes place around his bedside, something remarkable happens. And I'm just going to read you a really short passage. The little family group around the bed are starting to sing a hymn. In chapel, David always sung shyly and in fact rather out of tune, but his voice now was powerful and becoming more certain of himself with each verse, and his recollection of the hymn's words was exact. As he sang, he took his arms out from under the covers and raised them above his head, his wrists and hands pale and startling as bones, extending from cuffs of pyjamas which had become far too big and which now fell vacantly back towards his elbow. He seemed almost to be conducting the music or commanding us to sing, all the while singing himself, his eyes closed and an expression on his face that was a kind of relieved joy. At the last verse, his hands dropped again to his side and he sighed and rolled his face away from us again on the pillow in a way that seemed to me to be final. It was the last time in his life that David was able to verbalize anything, And yet engaging with his spirituality when so much else was lost to him was a really significant part of his dying well. And she goes on to say that in that moment she felt he was participating in his death, that he was engaging with the Saviour so important to him. The next slide, please. I don't know whether we need to invite people to mute. Would that be helpful? Great. So I just wanted to set out for you a really basic Christian understanding of death, because I think it expresses why signposting people to this kind of understanding is important if this is their faith. And so I think there's a really important sense in Christian thinking that God is with us in our dying as much as in our living. And that is drawn partly from the fact that at the heart of the Christian faith is God who dies like us and with us. So for the Christian, dying is not a topic to be avoided, but a really important part of faith. And talking about the death of Jesus as a central in the Christian story ought to be a way of us talking also about our own deaths. There's so much I could say about the Christian understanding of death, but there's just time really for a few headlines. And so the first core belief for Christians is that God is with us. We are promised that as we face death and bereavement, God won't leave us. And very famously, a psalm in the Jewish scriptures that Christians also pray with is Psalm 23, that talks of God as a shepherd walking with us through the valley of the shadow of death. So in death and in dying, Christians really want to say that we're not alone, but God is with us. A second really important strand is how God understands us as we die and as we grieve. So in Jesus, God's Son, God experiences what it is to die. That's part of the eternal memory of God, and so understands our experience in dying in some profound ways. And then in terms of grief, the Bible tells a story of when one of Jesus's friends dies, and the Bible says that Jesus wept with compassion for this man's sisters who are so bereft at the loss of him. So the Christian faith holds a truth that Jesus, God, understands what it is to be bereaved. And then Christian hope is that we are given new life after we die, that anyone who accepts God's invitation to be with him is given this new life. So it's a really important context for the Christian that dying, of course, on every human level is deeply traumatic, so painful, and yet it's accompanied with this strand of hope that this is not the end for a person who accepts God's invitation to be with him. Could I have the next slide, please? So as speakers, we were invited to share some of our experiences in accompanying people in dying well. And so I wanted just to share with you very briefly 3 stories of Dorothy and Edna and Alan, all of whom I accompanied in different ways in their dying. The picture above Dorothy's name is of Rosebery Topping, which is an amazing little Matterhorn that you can climb near Great Ayton in North Yorkshire. And although Dorothy was living in Doncaster when she died, she came from the Cleveland Hills, and she yearned for the Cleveland Hills very much. She died of motor neurone disease at her own home, surrounded by her very large family. And one of the things I did as her parish priest was to read to her one of the Psalms that I knew was her favourite, which speaks about lifting up our eyes to the hills and finding God helping us at those moments. And because I knew that the Cleveland Hills were important to her, and this was her favourite psalm, I was able to speak words that she'd lived with all of her 80 years and were a huge comfort to her. Edna was also in my parish in Doncaster. She was my birthday twin. She was many, many years older than me, but we shared the same birthday, the 7th of December, so we had a special bond. And she had a number of illnesses that caused her to deteriorate. She also died at home. But I gave her what you can see on the screen, which is a cross shaped especially for people to hold in their hands. And so Edna's cognition deteriorated a lot, but she always held on to this cross in her hand. And she did call it her Jesus. And if it got lost in the bed covers, she would say to her carers, "Where's my Jesus?" And they would find it for her. And one day when she was able to have more of a conversation, she said to me, "Where's my Jesus?" And I said, "Well, you're holding your Jesus in your hand, and he's holding onto your hand." And for her, that sort of physicality was a really important thing that could be given to her when conversation was much more challenging. Alan's story is much sadder, I'm afraid. So there he is on his diamond wedding anniversary with his wife Adrienne. I just blessed them on their 60th anniversary. But Alan caught COVID during one of the lockdowns, and he died in hospital. And that brought into me the sharpest kind of focus about what it is to die well, because for me, dying well is about presence, about being present to people. It's about community, the gathered people, and it's about touch. Alan was cared for brilliantly in Burton Hospital. They were absolutely wonderful, the intensive care staff, but they weren't able to do, of course, under huge pressure, what his community would normally have done for him. He would have been absolutely surrounded with love. People would have been holding his hands. It would have been a community death for him, if you see what I mean. And so COVID showed me really what we lose when the whole community isn't able to gather well. Those experiences and dozens of others make me think about what a priest can do to enable somebody to die well. Three really quick things. The first thing, really important, it's about permission giving, by which I mean enabling the really difficult conversations. I saw my role as a priest to ask people whether they were afraid and then to point them to reassurance. I think we have a role in being able to broker the conversations that are too difficult for families to have often, not in every case. I think a priest is a peace bringer, assuring the person of God's love. And I think with other professionals, it's about working out what personal care looks like, what this person's death should be, so that ordinary people actually die extraordinary deaths, ones that are right for them. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to very quickly, just one more slide, just to say this kind of care is available to anybody who lives in anywhere in England and Wales, because that's what the Church of England and Wales's parish system does. And if people want to access this care, all they have to do is put into this website, a church near you, their postcode, and then their local church will come up with a vicar's phone number, and you can just ring. Whether you've got no faith or a committed member of a faith, this kind of care is available to you. I'm sorry, sorry if I overran.
But only by a minute. So thank you so much. And thank you because you've spoken some love and shared some wonderful things. We're going to start a poll going, which just allows people to begin to capture some of the thoughts that they might have that emerge from the different speakers. So thank you so much, Bishop Mary. I'm going to move on, if I may, to introduce you to Imam Alias Kamani. And I'm going to hand over to you, Alias, if I may, for you to give a taster of what is important from a Muslim perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jane, and thanks, Bishop, as well, for your wonderful contribution. And thank you for this opportunity to just share, obviously, what I think is so important. You know, end of life for all of us, as we've already identified, is a critical juncture. You know, whatever our beliefs are, we realize the sanctity or the great significance of this moment. And I'm so glad that your policy is referring to dying well, because that's exactly how the Islamic approach is. It recognizes the vital need to have what you call the husn al-khatima, which means a good end. That in itself obviously provides not just solace to the individual, but obviously to the family and the wider network as well. And it's interesting, just as Beverly has mentioned as well, the centrality of Allah and God's presence in this moment. You know, the most frequent word we use at the time of bereavement is Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which means from Allah we have come, to Allah we return. This session is part of a half-day program that I deliver, and it's often very interactive as well, because I think sometimes it's so important that we have safe spaces where we can have very difficult conversations regarding speech, regarding faith and other matters as well. So I'm going to touch on, just give you a bit of a taster around some of these end of life issues. If I can have the next slide, please. Okay, I want to begin, just like, you know, I want to begin with a very important image. This, for those of you who don't know, is called the Kaaba. This is the point of direction for all of the 2 billion Muslims who are in the world at the moment. We make the direction of our prayer the Kaaba, which is this cuboid structure in Mecca, which is in the Grand Mosque of Mecca. And, you know, 5 times a day, we pray towards this direction. Okay, that's 2 billion Muslims. This is the central point, which kind of galvanizes our whole community. And you could say that this is the most sacred site in Islam. Next slide, please. Yeah. It's a bit slow. Can I have the next slide as well, please? Yeah. Okay. And the next one. Okay. So what I want to show you here. So this is the most sacred place for Muslims on earth. And on the most sacred nights, and this is in the month of Ramadan, it's called the Night of Power, which is often referred to as the 27th night, and also during the month of pilgrimage. These are the most sacred nights. You'll have 2 million people in one place. That's the capacity of the area, 2 million people. So this is the most sacred place for Muslims on the most sacred night, or on the most sacred day, in the most sacred month, doing the most sacred acts of worship for us as Muslims. But then the Prophet, peace be upon him, he told us that the sanctity of human life is far more sacred than the most sacred place on the most sacred day, doing the most sacred thing. So, and that's where the whole subject of bioethics begins for us as Muslims. The fundamental sacred, the sanctity of human life, of every single human life, that has to be preserved, that has to be protected, and to maintain with dignity in our living and in our dying. So if you can have the next slide, please. And as a fundamental principle, Islam recognizes life is sacred. It is the greatest gift that we have. The greatest blessing that we have from Allah, from God, is our life. Every moment is phenomenal, and therefore, again, it has to be valued, protected. Okay. You know, and the concept of what we call quality of life, therefore, you know, the life itself overrides, you know, it's vital for us to therefore maintain the quality of life as much as possible, and to engage in whatever means we have to preserve life. Next slide, please. One of the models that I've come up, so I've spent the last 35 years working around mainly mental health. My main work is around mental health. But also advise around end of care. If I can go back one slide, we can go back, please. Okay, so I've come up with a simple 3 areas model, because this is vital. First, it's vital for us to know about lived reality. We have so much diversity here in the UK, of which the Muslim community is one, but the Muslim community itself is also massively diverse. We're talking up to, you know, over 50 nationalities, over 200 languages. We're talking about people from enormously diverse backgrounds. So therefore, just because you see one Muslim behaving in one way, it doesn't necessarily mean that all Muslims behave in that. Some people are driven by faith and what faith teaches and faith-based principles, others by cultural principles. And it's important to differentiate when we're working with Muslims around culture and faith. And often they are very, very different. So not all Muslims behave in accordance with what Islam teaches. In fact, quite often it's the opposite. That's the case. And then you have people who just basically, it's their personal choices, okay, that have got nothing to do with faith or culture. So it's important to have a very, an approach which is based on contextual factors with cultural knowledge and being culturally competent. So having access to knowledge and awareness that gives us those vast and rich cultural perspectives. But also it's important for us to have ethics that guide our principles as well, promoting equality, dignity, and justice. Next slide, please. So currently there are apparently 4 million Muslims in the UK, 6.5% of the population. And what's interesting is that the demographic profile of the community is that it's predominantly young. 60% are under the age of 25. What that also means is that we have an aging, we have an aging population as well. And so therefore, given the nature of large family sizes as well, one of the things as an imam that I'm often involved in is obviously advising around end-of-life issues, and then engaging obviously in end-of-life rituals and practices, as well as funeral practices, and then providing post bereavement, grief and loss support. Next slide, please. And obviously this is one of the vital kind of aspects of it. Now, it's really important that, especially in this issue of end of life and palliative care, that, as I said, not all Muslims are the same. It's important to recognize that we have enormous intra-Muslim diversity. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but it just gives you it. We've got our denominations, we've got different sects, we've got different schools of thought, we've got different levels of observance, and as I said, cultural factors, family factors. So what you're going to find is that even though I may say, look, this is what we find scholars and clerics and people who are experts in the area are talking about, often we find that Muslims will always behave in ways which are, different and distinct. And that's why sometimes this is not always a case of one size fits all, but really this is about relationship building and recognizing where individuals are, especially when it's end of life, when we're dealing with people who are obviously dealing with very difficult and challenging issues. And obviously this is where having the right kind of brokers, intermediates, and the role of imams and chaplains and chaplaincy services are vital to broker you could say the dialogue or the relationship between practitioners and between communities. Next slide, please. So what are the main issues when it comes to Islam, bioethical issues and dilemmas when it comes to end of life? Okay, the first and most important issue is the sanctity of human life. And that is recognizing that, the value of life and maintaining life and preserving life and using whatever we can to maintain that. And that also recognizes what is the definition of end of life. For a Muslim point of view, end of life is when the soul leaves the body. And so therefore that is just like brain failure and brain stem failure, as well as heart and respiratory failure. Although it may be deemed that an individual obviously has lost higher brain functions, and therefore it's only obviously lower brain functions, and so therefore the brain death, from the Islamic point of view, okay, death is defined by the absence of a soul, which is, as I said, brain death, respiratory death, and cardiac cessation as well. We also have this important belief that Allah, who is our creator, is the giver and taker of life. And so therefore the ultimate moment of our death has already been predetermined and pre-recorded. Removing life support and not resuscitating, again, this is a very emotive issue where families will often have conflict with medical practitioners because they want to maintain life support as long as possible, whereas medicine maybe otherwise. And again, it's another very important principle is what we call the concept of stewardship. And that is that our physical body is a trust. It is a blessing. It is a gift from our creator, and it has to be maintained with dignity. And also that means dignity of mind, body, and soul. But also, it's an imperative on us to seek medical treatment and seek curative means. There are also a whole range of extensive religious rights, duties, and obligations during end-of-life practice, in which the family will play a very, very central role. And you'll often notice it in end-of-life settings that there will be not just immediate family members, but quite a lot of extended family members as well. Treatment of the sick is a human right and an obligation. And at the same time, there has to be a respect for medical authority, who we consider as the authority figures. If you can continue with the slide, please. Yeah. There are also a range of issues around medications and the permissibility of certain medications as well, which obviously need guidance, and people need to be guided through both individuals who are receiving medication as well as practitioners.
Apologies if people can't hear. I don't know if I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm sure on my side. Can just everyone confirm that the sound is okay on my side? If someone can just confirm that, please.
Alias, the sound isn't great. It's sort of muzzy, and it started great when you started. So for the last few minutes, that stayed crackling. That's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll try to stay as close to my microphone as possible.
Close to the mic and still, maybe.
Yeah, apologies that the sound is probably a connectivity issue. Yeah. Okay. Given the sanctity of human life, then obviously assisted dying and suicide are prohibited acts. Okay. We also have significant rules around organ transplantation, human tissue, as well as the type of medication. And one of the most contentious areas is around postmortems. What we found in the UK is by working very closely with coroners, that and the new technology around non-invasive postmortems through body scanners, that this has provided a way to obviously avoid invasive postmortems. Because from an Islamic point of view, and similar to Judaism as well, a postmortem is considered as a mutilation of the body. And that goes back to the principle of human dignity, that there is a dignity that is afforded not just to the living, but also to the deceased as well. Again, death and burial rituals are very particular within the Islamic tradition, in which prompt burial soon after death is encouraged. And the family is intensively involved in this. And there are also issues around gender and modesty as well. So in the same way, whilst one is living, there is a very strict code around modesty and the covering of the body and maintaining the dignity of the body. You also maintain that post life as well. Okay, next slide, please. So, okay, I'm going to shift through it. Can you go to the next one, please? Yeah. Okay, so when it comes back onto what we call the fundamentals of Islamic law, there are 6 very fundamental frameworks, and these form the basis of what we call our bioethics in relation to end of life. The first one is the protection of life. Everything must be done to maintain life. Then it's protection of faith. So people's faith needs at this most critical juncture, as the soul passes from this world into the next world, also have to be observed as much as possible. And that means at end of life, ensuring access to chaplains, imams, and faith leaders, as well as family members, in order to ensure that that transition is fulfilled. There's also the protection of family, and the protection protection number 4, which is the protection of intellect and mental capacity. This is a really key one, because individuals who will be in the end of life will also then, if they're on medications, if they're on excessive medications, which can have an impact in terms of their mental acuity and mental capacity, then are unable to, for example, engage in certain acts of worship and certain sort of observance. There are guidance that we have on the level of medication, and that can be provided at end of life, depending on individuals, in order to maintain that mental capacity. And then the 6th one, which is most relevant here, is the protection of that death has to be dignified. It has to be something which, in order it affords respect and allows an individual to die according to their faith principles, irrespective of what faith principles they are. Next slide, please. So we have what we call the maqasid, but we also have what we call the spirit of Islam. And these are what we call our core values. And that means first sin, that there has to be peace in this process, compassion and mercy, justice and fairness, fulfilling obviously an individual's final wishes, and as stewards who are there to administer that, but also making sure that once one has deceased, that those people who have the stewardship of the deceased body after that can maintain this as well. And then obviously, truth telling, as has already been told as well, that this is an opportunity for individuals also to reconcile with other family members as well. And the final one is that we take a knowledge-based approach. And that means that often a lot of our conflicts occur when individuals, obviously in an emotional and distressed and traumatized state, often fail to recognize, one, Islamic knowledge as well as medical knowledge as well. Therefore, it's emotions and feelings which override, both their Islamic principles as well as medical knowledge. And so it's really getting the balance right between all of these. And I did have a slide, but what we find is that And this will be my final slide. So we will be involved, yeah. And so what we find is, when it comes to end of life issues, there is a whole range of brokers and key players within this, yeah. Of course, family and parents, children and elders, multi-generational families play a critical role. And extended family members and patriarchs and matriarchs will exercise enormous control, okay, over what's going on, to the extent that that sometimes overrides. Yes, there will also be faith leaders, imams, priests, spiritual healers. People often will call me for particular Islamic rulings on end-of-life issues, and therefore there will be a scholar on call in order to guide them through that person. But also we'll be finding out what we call spiritual healers. Sometimes there can be people in very vulnerable situations. There will be people who will be quite opportunistic and will be quite exploitative as well. Then we find obviously the whole range of medical practitioners. But alongside that, in parallel, there's also what we call alternative practitioners and healers. Then we find, at least we find that, you know, that's counselors and therapists like myself, and also, you know. And so what we find in that whole environment is that there will be people who are on the inside, there's an inner circle who will really be engaged in, you know, managing those end of life issues. But then, and then there will be a range of people on the outside. And that's why brokers are critical in this whole process, in order to facilitate, obviously, an effective partnership between everyone involved. Okay, that's enough for me. That'll be enough for me. Yeah, that's enough for me.
We knew we were going to run out of time, but thank you so much, Alice, and it's been really, really lovely, and it's definitely given us a taster of what you do in your whole day. But I'm going to just draw your attention to the polls, which you can have on the side, but you obviously need to close down when you come back to look to see what the next speaker is talking about. I'm going to kindly introduce, if I may now, Jill Anders, who is a parish nurse in Reading. She's going to talk about her work, and she's very much involved in how you put some of this theory into practice from a faith perspective. So thank you, Jill. If I may let you have the floor for time now.
Yes, thank you. Don't worry, I won't be so long. And thank you for having me. I don't know how to follow the last two speakers, so I feel quite humbled and honoured to have been asked to speak. But I just wanted to share my experience. So as a parish nurse that's employed by the church, I work in the community and support those that are most vulnerable. And I work a lot with elderly people, and I did a bit of a survey with them of how dying well looks to them. I wanted to hear their views rather than just give my views, because I think it's really important to listen to what they feel that dying well means to them. And what came up was emotional and spiritual support. That was one of their top answers, and they wanted someone to be able to offer a presence, listen, and give them reassurance, provide that spiritual support, whatever that meant to them. I'm employed by the church, but we're open to all faiths and none. And it was having that spiritual peace, and I will go on to just give you an example about spiritual peace. Support anticipatory grief and bereavement. They wanted to know what would happen to their families, who would be there to support their families, who would come and support them in their grief following, and who would help them with the funeral arrangements. So that was really important to them, was their family connections as well, and who would support them. And as a parish nurse, that's something we do. We journey with the whole family, not with just a person who's at end of life. So we get to know the family first. We journey through that part of their life, and then we carry on supporting the family. And that was really important to people who are at end of life. Social connections, they love the fact that we can facilitate visits and interact with GPs and hospices and hospitals. And they love the advocacy and coordination that the parish nursing service do. So that liaison with other people, that we can sit down and bring everything together for them, because quite often they're seen by different people, and the parish nursing service is just a very small team, so they get to know us really well, and we are their main point of contact, and we will always go back and support them. And also encouraging that advanced care planning and preparation, and we are quite frank and have some very serious conversations about what's going to happen, what do they want, how do they want to die, and that can be really difficult. Like Bishop Mary said, we can have those really tough conversations, but actually it's appreciated, and it's very appreciated by the family, because you find that a lot of people avoid and speaking to them. So the parish nurse role is really, we're a companion, so we walk alongside the person and the family. We advocate, so we ensure that care aligns with their values. We connect, so we link to resources and community support, and we're a comforter, and we provide that hope and peace in their final days. And I think that was what was more important to all of these people that I spoke to. And I'll just give you an example, well, two examples of dying well and a not so dying well. So we were supporting a lady in the community who had a terminal illness, and she was admitted to hospital. Her sister lived quite a few miles away, so she didn't really get any family support. So as a service, we supported her. As she went into hospital, she was not allowed to eat or drink because of her medical condition, and she was left alone a lot of the time. And what really struck me was that she died alone with the blue curtains pulled round, and no one really knew the time of death. They couldn't tell me when I asked. They couldn't tell me the time of her death. And I had asked to be called at any time, 24 hours, if anything changed, and no one called me, and so she died alone. And that really struck me, that this lady had gone into hospital, had died alone with her blue curtains drawn around it, and the hospital couldn't even tell me what time she had died. So I now try to advocate for people who, when they're talking about how they're going to die, where they want to be, do they want to be at home, would they like to be in a hospice, what happens in hospital. And the other extreme is I got referred by a social worker from Reading Borough Council to go and speak to someone who needed spiritual support with her end of life. And this was a 101-year-old lady, and she knew she was dying, and her daughter knew she was dying, but she just did not have that peace. So we went to visit her. We built up a relationship with her and her daughter. And while I sat with the lady, one of my team would take the daughter out and have a coffee, which was so important to support the daughter as well. And I was able to talk to this lady about her death, what she wanted, why she felt the way she did. I was able to help her write her will. We were able to talk about her funeral, what she would like at her funeral. And this was so important to her, to die well, knowing everything had been put into place. And she did pass away, and she did get exactly what she wanted. But not only that, we now support the daughter, and we've kept supporting the daughter. And I think that was so important to this lady, that we were there to support her family as well. So I can't give you all statistics on lots of things, but I just want to say that dying well for people is about having that information, knowing what they can and can't do, knowing that they can put their wishes down, and people will follow those wishes. I think that's so important, that they know that those wishes are going to be supported and followed, and also there is care for their family afterwards. And as a parish nursing team, that's what we do. So I'm not going to speak loads more, but I just wanted to tell you what people had told me, and we do it. We're doing it all the time in the community. I've got 4 people end of life at the moment. Most of them would like to die at home, and we're just there to support them, and actually to liaise and make sure that they die well in their own homes with the full support that is available. We have an amazing NHS and amazing services with Sue Ryder, and it's there, and it's just people need to know how to access and how to navigate systems. So that's really all I want to say. So I'm quite short, but thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you, because I'm sure there are some people on this call who weren't aware of quite how extensive your role is, and the way in which it contributes to really underpinning the work that gets done by healthcare professionals and social care. So thank you so much. I'm going to, we've got the polls showing, and for those of you that maybe are struggling with it, on the top bar there is a specific they've got some Q&As coming in, which is great, and there is a specific button which gives you polls, which allows the word clouds to begin to come in. Do you want to go back? But can we go back and just have a little bit of Q&A, or should we? I'm going to share the webinar. That's kindly reminding me that the next webinar is going to be about carer impact, and obviously that's something that we want to begin to pull into the discussion. But I'm going to hand over, if I may, to Zoe, who's Head of Palliative and End-of-Life Care for the ICB. There's going to be a third poll question that's going to go into that poll discussion. And then obviously what we're able to do is generate those word clouds to illustrate some of the messages that people have collectively done. And so Zoe, may I let you have the floor now and begin to help us to think about any outstanding questions or what we would want to do in the next to make this this change happen.
So hi everyone, as Jane says, I'm Zoe, I'm head of all age palliative care for the ICB. Really thankful for everybody who's come and joined the call on this wintry November afternoon, and really thankful to Mary, Aliat and Jill for their presentations. I think it's so nice to hear about it, and somebody sitting here as an atheist, actually how important it is. And I think in that final moments, actually you do look for your belief and you do look for a different part of that faith which you don't tap into, particularly from my view. So it's really, really powerful to hear how in your individual community faiths, what that means and how that kind of comes together, and the generic aspects of it about community that is clearly pulled through. As Jane mentioned at the very beginning of the session, the Thames Valley Integrated Care Board, which we will be moving ourselves to as of the 1st of April, will be looking to create a dying well strategy. And with that, we really need your help to help build that and what it means. And really party to that is the integrated work that we have with Reading Borough Council at this moment in time. And this is the first of the series of events. And so it'd be really grateful, as well as part of the questions and answers, to reflect what you would like to know about as well. And what can we do to help support that as we move forward? And what can that mean for you as members of the population in which we overall serve? So just in terms of some of the polls that have come up, Annie, do you want to pop that back on?
Just one moment. The polls should be up in the chat for everybody to see.
Yep.
Yeah. So everyone should be able to see there and add any further answers that they would like.
Fantastic. But I think from looking at some of the responses, the key things that have come up is community, family, faith, being together, and that sense of togetherness. And what we would like to understand from you is what other questions should we be asking, and how do we really reflect what those aspects need to think about when we look to build the next steps into the dying well strategy for our area. So I'm going to hand back to Jane, and I'm really keen that if anybody would like to be party to the dying well build, then please do reach out to one of the team. We will put our emails in the chat, and any information is great information. Marcella.
Hello, Jane. Thank you so much for inviting us to this forum. It's really important. We've learned loads and taking notes, still learning loads about what it means to die well to different people. Just quickly to say, so Sue Ryder at the Duchess of Kent, we will be hosting an event next week on the 2nd of December, and we're inviting people of faith and culture to come together in person. So if anyone was interested, is it okay to put the poster in the chat? Is that all right? So you'll be more than welcome to come along and then meet in person, which is also always nice to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcella. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask the panel or myself or Bev or anything from today's session?
Can I say something, please? My name's Sarah Griffin, and I chair the Reading Interfaith Group. In the context of the group, we are meeting this evening, actually, to plan a programme for next year. One of our most successful events has been on the subject of death. So I would be looking to do, you repeat what's good and what's relevant. So if anyone here felt as if they would like to come or contribute, perhaps as a speaker, or to write something in our newsletter, that would be really welcome. On a personal level, I've had the loss of both my parents in the past couple of years and been in a situation of two very different contexts of palliative care. And the thing that I really wanted at the time, there were plenty of notices about the phone numbers and organisations to contact. But the first port of call for me would have been to be able to pick up a leaflet and read something reassuring. I mean, similar, I'm being flippant here a little bit, but I picked up this from the library, which was on the history of Reading Society, which gave me a good route in to further information. But it's just a little bit more. It takes a lot of courage to pick up a phone and talk to a complete stranger, particularly at times like that. So you need something more immediate that can get you right there. But yeah, I really look forward to hearing from you. With regards to
lovely. And one of our hopes was that we would sort of unearth some of the activity that's going on in the area. And so working with you would be a really exciting thing. And yes, thank you for sharing the personal bit. I will let others come in response, but the idea that we need better resources, written resources, has been flagged. So if I go to Nicola, I know Alice might want to pick up on that point because she and I have talked about that as well. So Nicola, do you want to go with your thoughts?
I don't mind if Alice wants to come in first, and then going.
Alice, I don't know whether it was on that point or whether you want to talk about something different.
No, I think the resources is very, very important. I think that is what a lot of people are requesting, because the resources are the big, because sometimes having these webinars are good, but having information where they can go to would be a good bit. But the other thing that I'm quite keen on, and it is something Alice shared about, is about the diversity of communities. So there are other communities as well that we need to think about. So like the Hindu community and the Sikh community, and also the Chinese community, they all do things differently. And I think we need, it would be nice for us to see what is common and what is different, because there is also the element of, Alice talked about the postmortems and things like that, because within Islam, I'm sure, Alice, you're right, we have to be buried within 24 hours, and that can delay things. And that's the same with a lot of culture. And we as service providers need to understand the sensitivity of this. Because that is, but also the other thing that I'm going on is also about the respect form, how we all need to understand about the respect form. And that hasn't been addressed here, kind of thing. This is something we need to talk about.
So you'll be pleased to know, Alice, that whilst we're going to focus on carers at our next webinar, we thought that to come the spring, we would actually have a specific webinar to actually pick up that point that you raised. So thank you so much. Nicola, can I come back to you?
Yes, yeah. So my, perfect segue in terms of the acknowledgement of skills there. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nikki, workforce and nursing midwifery workforce lead here at ICB. I'm also an adult nurse by trade. So my question is to Jill, in what led you into the world of parish nursing?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I've got a varied background in nursing. So I worked in prisons, I've done A&E and trauma. And I think as I got older, I wanted to be able to spend more time to support people that actually really needed it, those that are off the radar, living on the margins. And it's exactly what I'm doing. I support people who can't access services or feel the inequality that they have because for whatever reason they feel forgotten or they're not targeted. So as a parish nurse, I've got the time to go around, I home visit, I've got the time to sit down and talk to them, and then I can go back and I am their point of contact, so that it won't be somebody else, it will be me going back and supporting them. And I think that's really important. If I say I'm going to phone back, I do phone back. If I say I'm going to visit, I do visit. And to me, that's far more enriching than actually at the moment working on a really busy ward when you're so busy and you can't really give that patient care. And it's just showing love and care to the people who live in our community. So that's why I'm doing parish nursing.
Thank you. Yes, and
It's a lovely
a few,
answer.
but you do a hell of a lot to support the patient or the person in the community, and and actually, I didn't even realise that parish nursing existed before. Not before this. I knew before this session, but not long before this session. Actually, it's a sort of a workforce that is not well known, but doing a hell of a lot of good work out there by the sounds of it. So very interesting to hear about that. Yes.
Thanks. Alias, can I bring you in?
Yeah, no, I just think, just building on the point that's just been made, the role, again, one thing that's greatly misunderstood is what is the role of an imam, okay, and what is the role of the mosque? So unfortunately, it's become a bit too compartmentalized, where it's just related to acts of observance, but the mosque is really the community hub. And so the role of the imam, really fundamentally, 80% of our role is pastoral care. So what we're dealing with on a week-to-week basis are all these issues around births and marriages and deaths, and we're therefore dealing a lot of pastoral care. And so therefore, it's vital that imams themselves are skilled in providing advice and guidance, and also knowing about the level of provision which is out there in order to act as effective brokers. And that's a training need within our community as well, because not all imams are well trained in terms of how to, one, engage with the full, and that's why it can become almost seen as obstructive. So, having parish nurses is a wonderful thing, because that then allows a broker between faith communities and agencies. And that is the role that mosques and imams are supposed to play, but often due to limitations in resources and levels of competence, unfortunately, that isn't always the case.
Right. Thank you, Alice. And I think what we wanted to do was to try and begin to pick up this idea of it's faith beliefs, but it's also faith in action, and it's how do you marry those two up together. So we've got a minute left just for me to share something about the next webinar and the date, which is January the 15th, and it's going to be a lunchtime session to try and capture those people who sadly felt that this sort of time of day was difficult. And so we hope that we'll have a slightly different audience, but we would love you all to be part of it again. And we will definitely pick up some of the points that have been made about the need for resources and what is important. But thank you all so much for today. Thank you to Bishop Mary, thank you to Alice Kamani, and thank you to Jill Anders. We've really enjoyed having you with us. We know it's a taster for something hopefully much bigger. There are some helpful resources about what we're trying and aiming to achieve in terms of a compassionate community in our area, specifically with Reading Borough Council. And we'll share this slide deck and any other information that you'd like if you would like us to after the meeting. So thank you to Bev, to Zoe, to Jenny, to Anu, who helped to make this a success. It's been lovely to have you all.
And thank you, Jane. Thank you all. Take care.
I just say thank you so much, everybody. And if you do want a set of slides to be sent to you, please do contact us. We've put contact details into the chat.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you. Okay, there are a few people that have
Thanks, Bev, so much for all your hard work with this. I know there are a few people
that's okay.
still
Yeah,
to
there are
go,
a few
but,
practicalities. I've just realised people are requesting, but obviously if the invitation's been forwarded on, I don't have their email address. So if
that's
people
a
do
good point,
want
isn't it?
a set of slides, then we need the email address.
Yes, that is an interesting thing, although hopefully we will keep a record of who attended from the participants, I think.
And anyone that
if we
attended
can.
should be able to get access to the recording, I believe, but
I think so.
we'll check that.
But you are right, there are a few practical things, and actually, but equally, I think possibly.
Can I
we
suggest
will-
that we pause this one and have a debrief on a different
Separate
element,
meeting, yeah.
because it's still recording.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't know if I can stop the recording. I think there has to be Anu.
Yeah. So I
Okay,
think
thank you
if
all.
we leave it, then yeah, we'll see you later.
So they'll know to send their email now, Bev.
Hopefully. Thank you. Bye.